of philosophy, science, politics, and the arts were nurtured and became the heritage of the Western world. Greece is also the land where Christianity found a fertile soil to spread its message to Europe. Greek philosophy and the Greek language were among the tools the disciples of Christ relied on to teach about their Lord's message to the nations. In this land, the Byzantine Empire built the core of its 1,000-year existence. It is the land of a people who love freedom and life with a real passion. Throughout the various stages of its life, Greece and her people have created mythologies and written heroic pages of history. 2,000 years later, Greece is still a land of history and legend, a land of mystery and myth, a land of faith and miracles. Hello, I'm Terry Casey for International Vision. Today we will visit Western Greece and an island that is the home of a celebrated Greek saint, as well as the site of a strange phenomenon that many people don't hesitate to call a miracle. The island is Kefalonia, and every year in the middle of August, people celebrate the memory of a saint who performed miracles empowered by his deep faith. Saint Gerasimos was a monk. He lived in Mount Athos and Palestine during the 16th century before he settled to the island of Kefalonia, where he lived until his death in 1576. There he founded a monastery and performed numerous miracles. He had the power to heal and also had insight to the future. Orthodox faithful, as well as the official church, attest to the miracles that continue to modern days. In turn, the faithful show their reverence during a special festival dedicated to the memory of their saint. Now, during this festival, a joyful procession takes place. The body of the saint is carried at the head, and thousands of people follow to the saint's church, where they can pay their respects to the miraculously preserved remains.
των Αγίων Εδόξων Μεγάλων Ιεραρχών, των Αγίων Εδόξων και Καλλινίκων Μαρτύρων, των Οσίων και Θεοφόρων Πατέρων και Μητέρων ημών, του Οσίου Πατρόφημων Γερασίμου του Νέου Αστικού και Θαυματού και Προστάτου ημών, που τη μνήμην επιτελούμε και πάντων των Αγίων, ελεήσε και σώσε ημάς, ως αγαθός και φιλάνθρωπος, και ελεήμων Θεός. Διαρκών των Αγίων Πατέρων ημών, Κύριε Ιησού Χριστέ ο Θεός, ελέησον και σώσον ημάς. Διαρκών του Αγίου Δεσπότου ημών, Κύριε Ιησού Χριστέ ο Θεός.
Σήμερα είναι μια μεγάλη μέρα για την Κεφαλονιά.
Today is a great day for the island of Kefalonia and its people. I'm here to celebrate the feast day of Saint Gerasimos, and I wish to everyone, the locals who live on the island and all the Greeks around the world, that they enjoy the blessing of the saint.
The island of Kefalonia is one of the numerous islands that, along with the mainland, constitute the modern Greek state on the southeast part of the Mediterranean Sea. Kefalonia, like the other Greek islands in the Ionian Sea, was seized and ruled by a succession of foreign powers from the time of its fall to the Romans in 189 BC until its annexation to Greece in 1864. Kefalonia is the largest of the Ionian Islands, with an area of about 300 square miles. It has an irregular coastline, and it is mountainous. The main towns are Argostoli, the capital of the island, and Lixouri. The island's population is about 30,000. The principal industries on the island are fishing, agriculture, and tourism. And besides the obvious attractions like endless sunshine, beautiful beaches, and proximity to many cultural sites, Kefalonia offers visitors another important advantage. Its people, who embrace life at its fullest and know how to enjoy every little moment. The Wine Festival is a famous gathering to celebrate the new wine season and to bring people together in song and dance. As serious as they are about their entertainment, Greeks are equally serious about their religious life. In fact, such festivities happen around major religious holidays and near the church celebrating on a particular feast day. Our story begins around such a religious holiday. On the other side of the island, we come to the site of a phenomenon so strange that the locals don't hesitate to call it a miracle. We have come to the small village of Markopoulo, some 18 miles from the capital of the island. We are at the site of the Church of the Virgin Mary, visited by thousands every year on the feast day of the Mother of God on August 15th.
We have come here to pray at the Church of the Virgin Mary and receive her grace. We also wanted to see the snakes, which are famous around the world. I know that they come out on the 6th of August, the day of the Transfiguration, and then disappear after the Day of the Virgin on the 15th. They're harmless, we can handle them, and they don't attack anyone. For many of us, their appearance is a miracle.
After the big earthquake, the old church was destroyed and only the steeple remained. That steeple is where the snakes come from every year on the 6th of August. Sometimes 10 snakes, sometimes fewer. If for any reason the snakes don't show up, something bad happens to the island and the country. I strongly believe this. After all, our religion is full of miracles like this one. And you know what? When you pray for something, it will happen, if you have faith. And if you have faith, everything falls into place.
They're not big, probably 2 feet long, and you can see on their foreheads and on their tongues the sign of the cross. It's a story that's been passed along for generations. It's a big story. That's why you get Christian faithful from all over Greece who come to visit the site and see the snakes. I believe it's a miracle, and I'm very happy that I live here and witness this event every year. Yes, it is a miracle.
The miracles of Christ are important as a kind of norm or a paradigm for anything that claims or is said to be a miracle. And basically, Christ performed miracles always with a very specific purpose. They weren't for show or display. They were for a reason. And that reason, that purpose, was always to restore a right relationship between God and the individual or the community that was the recipient of this miracle. So Christ performed miracles. Christ amazed people. Christ brought people to a place where they could wonder about God and be open to God. Why? So that they could enter into or return to a right relationship with God through the agency of the miracle. And I think something similar seems to be happening in this church, inasmuch as the right relationship between humanity and non-human creation has been restored. And it's certainly something that brings people out in wonder. I mean, it's an amazing event, and people are drawn and have been drawn to this church to witness this phenomenon. Some of them might simply be curious, but having arrived there as a curious tourist, let's say, they very well could have a powerful faith experience that could transform their lives.
Why would visitors from all over Greece and abroad come to this small village in pilgrimage to a small, insignificant church? Is it the site of a miracle, as many of the devout visitors believe? To find an answer to our question, we have to go back in history, almost 6 centuries ago. Our story begins in the year 1400. And where the church stands today was the site of a convent dedicated to the Virgin Mary. The Greek Orthodox Christian nuns lived and prayed here in peace until the day when a pirate ship was spotted from the convent's tower. Their destination and their pirate colors made their target very apparent. They were headed to the convent that had a plentiful supply of food from cultivating the surrounding fields. They also stored many artifacts and valuables donated by the local faithful. The first attack was swift. The pirates raped, pillaged, and plundered the convent. Word of their attack was carried from port to port and pirate to pirate. "40 years later, in 1650, the convent and its nuns once again fell prey to another ship full of murderous pirates. After the second attack, the convent lay abandoned and silent for many years. Then it was reopened as a convent to nuns in service of the Virgin Mary.
It's unfortunate, but true, that many of us know very little about monasticism in the Orthodox Church. And although most of us have seen or are at least familiar with monks, male monastics, many of us are completely unaware of the fact that we also have a very strong and ancient tradition of nuns in the Orthodox Church as well. And they have been there from the very beginning, just like the male monks have been, and they have left their mark on our tradition. And they have contributed to our faith in a very remarkable way. It's unfortunate that more of us aren't aware of these women and what they have done. In terms of the life that they lead as nuns, it's very similar to the life lived by their male counterparts. They generally live in community. They live lives of great simplicity that are organized around intense prayer, fairly rigorous manual labor. They very often are involved in the welfare of the local community outside the walls of the convent, and in some cases work very actively staffing hospitals and retirement homes and things of that sort. So on the one hand, they are definitely devoted to their religious life, but they are also very much concerned about the life of the world.
The focal point for the church's visitors is an old silver icon of the Mother of God. For Orthodox Christians, icons, or holy images of persons and events, are an integral part of an act of prayer, not as objects of worship, but as representations for veneration. They serve only as reminders to instruct and assist the faithful in their prayers. The silver icon of the Virgin Mary is the same icon that played an important role during a third attack of the convent in the year 1705. This time, however, the pirates' mission was not successful. According to legend, when the pirate ship appeared on the horizon, the nuns rushed to the church and began to pray fervently to the Mother of God for her protection from the evil that was on the way. Pirates threw anchor at the small port of Castello, rowed ashore, and made their way to the convent, expecting to see helpless, frightened nuns. What they saw instead astounded them. The convent was filled with snakes, hissing and slithering across the floor. The pirates noticed something even more odd. The snakes had tiny white crosses on top of their heads and on their tongues. crosses looked exactly like those on the black habits commonly worn by Orthodox Christian nuns. As legend has it, the Virgin Mary had heard the nuns' prayers, and in order to protect them from the murderous intentions of the pirates, she had turned them into snakes. The pirates were afraid to go into the convent. They abandoned their plans of looting and instead set the building on fire and left the island, never to raid again. The flames consumed half of the village, while the entire convent was destroyed. The only item to be recovered from the ashes was the silver icon of the Virgin Mary, which was left miraculously intact. The villagers saw this as a symbol of God's will and decided to build a church honoring the Virgin Mary. The church was built around the silver icon in the year 1710, on the same location where the convent once stood.
According to the tradition here, there was a convent of nuns who were attacked by pirates who came to rape and plunder. After the third attack, the nuns were transformed into snakes. The same tradition holds that sooner than later, the snakes will be turned back into their human forms. The appearance of the snakes is a miracle. We've looked around every year before the 6th of August and can't find any snakes. We look around after the 15th, and again, you can't find them. If you go around the whole island, you won't be able to locate the same type of snake. You can find snakes that are 10 feet long, but this particular snake, you won't find it. And it's easy to distinguish because it has the sign of the cross on its forehead and its tongue.
I've been studying reptiles, particularly snakes, for a long time. I've devoted about 30 years of my life to studying different phases of snakes' behavior and the ecology of snakes. And frankly, I'm kind of amazed and perplexed with the way that people respond to these animals. Most of the time, they're not particularly aggressive, and we do see situations where maybe 10% of the snakes in most parts of the world are venomous, and yet all of them are treated as if they're tremendously dangerous animals. That's one thing that has always amazed me. Another thing that perhaps scares a lot of people is the fact that maybe they move without legs. Legless locomotion is something that maybe is an intriguing or a scary thing to a lot of people. And last but not least, I think something else that enters into the picture is what people have been taught by their parents. Maybe that's one reason why most people seem to be so afraid of these reptiles.
There's an ancient Greek tradition according to which the souls of the departed either become serpents or are associated with serpents. And I'm thinking, for example, of an episode in the life of Plotinus, who's the famous founder of Neoplatonism. At his deathbed, at the moment he expires, a serpent is seen to wriggle out from the bottom of the bed and disappear into a hole in the ground. And this is taken by everybody to be a symbol of his soul. In Virgil's Aeneid, Aeneas goes to the tomb of his father and he offers these various food and drink sacrifices, which are consumed by a serpent, which again Aeneas takes to be a symbol, if not the very soul, of his father. And this to me seems to be an intriguing parallel between the serpents that we see in the church in Kefalonia, which are said by the inhabitants there to be the souls or the persons somehow of a group of nuns.
It's a natural phenomenon connected with religion, because on a regular date, every year, and always at the same location around the steeple of the old church, we have the appearance of a certain kind of snake. These snakes don't appall humans, as is the usual case, but instead they attract them. And the snakes are so friendly that people want to touch them, pet them and see them with their own eyes. The main characteristic feature of these snakes are 4 white spots that form the sign of the cross on their foreheads. The other surprising fact about them is that they repeatedly appear and disappear on the same day from the same location. The pious people of the island have named them the Snakes of the Virgin. And I think it's an appropriate name, since the snakes appear and are seen by people around the major feast of the Dormition of the Mother of God.
Virgin Mary is also called in Greece Theotokos, which means Mother of God, and Panagia, all holy. She has a special place among the saints of the Christian Orthodox Church. She is, after all, the one who gave flesh to Christ. And for that, she can intercede to God on behalf of all humanity. And this is why most Orthodox faithful will instinctively turn to the Mother of God in times of need.
The Virgin has, for an extremely long time, occupied a very important place in the minds and the hearts of the faithful. And obviously, I think that has a lot to do with her role as a mother. I think all of us have mothers, and motherhood and maternity is something that most of us, anyway, can relate to in hopefully a positive way. Although this might not be true for some, I think it still remains a kind of a normal, a human experience that most of us have positive thoughts about. So, I mean, her role as mother and the attribute of maternity, I think, is something that has been just very pleasing and very attractive to people, and people have found a great deal of comfort in that. Now, in addition to that, she's not only our mother in a kind of spiritual sense, but she is the sort of biological mother, if you will, of Christ. And this means that she has a very special relationship to him, just as special, just as close, just as intimate as any relationship that any mother has with her son or daughter. And part of that relationship means having access to that individual. I mean, if your son is the most powerful ruler in the world, I mean, I think he would still, take time to listen to what his mother told him or whatever. She would still have access, let's say, to his presence, despite his power and despite his busy schedule or whatever. So Mary has always been seen in the Orthodox Church as someone who has access to Christ like no other human being does, in virtue of her, in virtue of the fact that she is his mother. She has a kind of privilege, in a sense. She has a kind of access, as I've said. She has a boldness, as the Church says, to a mother's boldness to approach her son and to plead on behalf of the world. And there are all kinds of sort of folkloristic traditions about the Virgin in heaven with her knees bleeding because she's just praying so hard for the salvation of the world. So again, in virtue of her special relationship to Christ, people have felt that she must also have special intercessory powers, that is, powers to ask and to entreat and to plead and to beseech God on behalf of broken humanity.
The 15th of August holds a prominent position in the Greek Orthodox Christian religious calendar. It is the feast day of the Dormition of the Mother of God and a national holiday. All around Greece, Orthodox Christian faithful gather to churches dedicated to the Virgin and pay tribute to her. On such a day, more than 250 years ago, the villagers of Markopoulo gathered to celebrate the feast day and at the same time celebrate their newly built church. The congregated faithful were astonished to see snakes appear on the church's steeple. People immediately thought of the snakes that had protected the convent from the pirates a few years ago. The snakes made their way straight to the icon of the Virgin Mary inside the church and crawled up all over the icon. The amazed witnesses noticed the white crosses on their heads, and upon further inspection, they also saw the same marking on their tongues. Their shock turned to joy when they became certain that these indeed were the same snakes and had no intentions to harm anyone. The priest quieted down the congregation and decided to continue the divine liturgy, celebrating the Dormition of the Mother of God. Now, when he opened a large gold-leaf gospel to read the traditional gospel excerpt, two of the snakes came down from the icon and crawled up on the pulpit, resting right on the open pages of the book. They did not obstruct the divine liturgy, and the priest continued reading the gospel. At the conclusion of the reading, the two snakes made their way back to the icon and stayed there with the other snakes until the celebration for the day was finished. Then the snakes retreated to the steeple of the church and disappeared from sight. The reason the snakes always retreat to the steeple of the church, according to legend, is because that was the spot the nuns had hidden from the pirates when they were turned into snakes. This legend and the belief in the miracle grew stronger with every passing year.
A few feet from here, past the stone fence, is the steeple of the old church. That's exactly where the snakes have appeared year after year. Sometimes there are more, sometimes fewer, but they keep showing up every year. People are very fond of them, and they've named them the Snakes of the Virgin, because they come out near this church, and they also have that sign of the cross on their heads. People pet them and find them totally harmless. It is very important, an important religious event, and also an important folkloric affair. Thanks to this, our village was put on the map, since this miracle is well known around Greece and to many places abroad where Orthodox faithful live. Every year we get thousands of visitors, true faithful. Some of them even sleep outside the church here in the courtyard so they can be the first ones to pay their respects to the Virgin and also see this phenomenon.
The Virgin is worshipped around the world with many different nicknames according to miracles she has performed or the history of the area. This church here is dedicated to the Virgin Mary, or as the locals call her, Virgin of the Snakes. After a Vesper service on the 6th of August, celebrating the Transfiguration of Jesus, the congregants go outside the church and start looking for the snakes, this holy phenomenon. It's the middle of the night, since church lets out at around 10 p.m. Sometimes we search for the snakes till 2, 3 in the morning. We wonder, who will find the snakes this year? Only the grace of the Virgin knows that. Whoever comes with faith and piety will find the snakes. Whoever finds them is guaranteed good fortune for himself and his family. It's a pure religious phenomenon with no fraudulence involved. After the snakes are found, they are escorted inside the church. It is a great joy to see the snakes on the icon, to take them on your own body. Nobody claims the snakes for their own benefit, but they belong to everybody, all the faithful who live here, and all those who come here to witness the miracle.
As could be expected, the snakes enjoy the protection of the locals and the pilgrims who see their presence as the best omen possible. A lot of cautionary tales are told for those who might want to harm the so-called holy snakes.
Once a sailor visited for a pilgrimage and stole one of the snakes to keep in his own ship. Soon afterwards, the snake died and a great misfortune fell on the sailor. His ship sank. When he returned to the island very contrite, he dedicated to the church a gold image of the snake. How do I explain it? The snakes belong to the Virgin. That's why we call her the Virgin of the Snakes.
Every year, since their first appearance in the middle of the liturgy, the snakes appear at the steeple of the church during the week-long celebration for the Virgin Mary, and then disappear on August 16th with the conclusion of the festivities. Only 2 times have the snakes not appeared on that particular day. Each time, the locals interpreted the event as a bad omen. Now, the first instance was in August of 1940. 2 months later, Greece was embroiled in the Second World War after an unprovoked attack by fascist Italy. Although the Greek army repelled the Italians, they could not resist the troops of Nazi Germany. The island of Kefalonia and all of Greece was occupied by the Nazi forces for the next 4 years, a grim period in the history of the land. The second disappearance of the snakes was recorded in August of 1953. A great earthquake shook the southeast Mediterranean. The epicenter was the island of Kefalonia, and the village of Marco Polo was hit especially hard, with many human casualties and destroyed buildings. Oh, the Church of the Virgin Mary was also damaged.
It's quite telling that when the snakes didn't appear in 1953, we had the catastrophic earthquakes on the island of Kefalonia. Most of the towns and villages were destroyed. Our own village, because it's a mountainous village and most homes are built really close to each other, suffered the most in all the island. We had, unfortunately, the biggest number of deaths here. The fact that the snakes did not appear that year was obviously seen as a bad omen.
These events have reinforced the local belief that the snakes are messengers of good fortune for the island and its inhabitants, and that, conversely, their absence bears ill messages for the land.
Many scientists have visited and tried to explain the phenomenon of these snakes. They haven't offered any answers as to why these snakes appear in the church. And why do they appear only on those specific days? Why do they have the crosses on their heads and tongues? For me, the presence of the snakes in the church is a miracle of the Virgin Mary, which attracts all these thousands of people every year. They come from as far as the United States, Australia, and of course, Greece. Anywhere where Orthodox Christians live, they have heard of this miracle. These snakes, I remember them from my mother who lived at a village nearby. I was a small kid, and I remember I'd come here with my cousin. We'd bring our flashlights and look for the snakes around the old steeple. We'd find the snakes and play with them. You know how kids are. But the snakes would not harm us. I also remember, way back before I was ordained to the priesthood, I would come every year to the feast with my friends. We'd take a snake from the church and start walking away towards the hills. The snake would turn its head to the church and would squirm trying to get away. We would then walk to the opposite direction towards the city, and the snake would turn its head to the direction of the church and try to escape, to come back here. What does this mean?
Some skeptics have proposed that the massive appearance of snakes is caused by their breeding habits, or that the crowds of visitors and the sounds of bells ringing rouse the snakes, which in turn make their way to the source of the disturbance. Some scientists are not so sure.
As a rule, snakes generally do not congregate like we see in this particular area. Generally speaking, most snakes either aggregate as adults, primarily for breeding purposes, or they may aggregate in the fall for hibernation purposes, particularly in northern latitudes. This is a highly unusual situation in that we have juvenile snakes that are aggregating at a certain time of the year when most snakes do not aggregate. So I find that highly unusual in that particular respect. In addition, most snakes try to avoid contact with humans, and after viewing the footage, it appears even more unusual in that the snakes are inside of a building, inside of this church, and that they only appear at certain times of the year. While we're aware that sometimes snakes will migrate through certain areas at certain times of the year, it appears very strange that these snakes are coming inside of the church, a place where there's lots of vibrations and a lot of noise and light and so on and so forth. So to see this kind of an aggregation with juveniles at this time of the year, I would have to say is almost unique. There may be some possibilities for what's happening, but at this point those haven't been studied. I would have to say it is a very unique situation. As far as the behavior of the snakes, most juvenile snakes are, well, we call it hyper-aggressive. Most juvenile snakes tend to be more aggressive than the adults. The reason being that in nature, juveniles are much more likely to be prey items. And so they tend to be more aggressive and more flighty, for instance, more fearful. So to see juvenile snakes like this that do not appear to be aggressive is also fairly unusual.
Following the main road from Argostoli to Poros, we come to the village of Markopoulou, famous for the unique phenomenon witnessed during the celebrations for the feast day of the Virgin Mary in mid-August. Harmless snakes make their appearance in the area of the church and disappear promptly after the conclusion of the festivities. This happens only once a year.
Every year, many media representatives come to the island to cover the story of the snakes. They report that the Greek Orthodox Church and the local people, along with all the thousands of pilgrims who flock to the Church of the Virgin Mary every year, see the appearance of the snakes as yet another miraculous manifestation of the divine in the natural world.
What do you remember?
I've lived here all my life and remember the snakes appearing every year around the 6th of August. Many people don't pay attention to them, but they should. They really should. This is a serpent that surprisingly attacks no one. even when noisy crowds of people are doing things to it that would normally annoy any snake. The snakes disappear after the feast of the Dormition of the Mother of God. How do I explain this? Let me tell you, I explain it through my faith and see it as a supernatural phenomenon, a miracle. If you believe in the existence of God and the Virgin Mary, it's easy to believe in this miracle. After all, if this was just a natural phenomenon and not a miracle, why would it happen only around the feast of the Virgin Mary?
We know that the islanders have a very ancient tradition about these serpents, somehow representing a group of nuns. Now, I think we need to respect that tradition, but I don't think we need to be limited by it either. And I mean, I think we can add other kinds of details or nuances or perhaps our own theological ideas about what exactly might be going on there. I think the whole idea of the reintegration of creation and the restoration of harmony between human and non-human creation, I think would be a terribly important message to try and extract from this phenomenon, to try and get behind, you know, the shock of the surface, let's say, to talk about paradise regained in a very real way. Secondly, there's the famous curse on the serpent in Genesis 3:15, where God places hostility between Eve and the serpent, and between Eve's descendants and the serpent's descendants. So because of what happened with Eve and the serpent in the garden, the two of them were cursed and given a legacy of mutual hostility. And Mary now, who functions as a kind of new Eve in a way, and because of her obedience, undoes the disobedience of Eve, and in a sense, because of that, conquers the serpent and triumphs over the serpent in a way that Eve was not able to. Also brings us back to this notion of paradise restored, in which this animal, this serpent, which played such a critical part in the fall of humanity, it has now also been reintegrated into its proper place in the created order.
This is definitely an intriguing phenomenon. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But it would need much more study before we could make any statements regarding the cause of this. It's possible that it would be something as simple as a thermal gradient that forms there, or an ancient migration route that snakes have used for many years, and the church was built on that spot. However, it is an extremely intriguing thing, and it appears to be very unique based upon the things that I've studied with snakes over the last 30 years.
We leave the island of Kefalonia the day after the festivities for the Virgin Mary have ended. Locals and pilgrims alike return to their everyday routine. The pilgrims depart feeling that their lives have been enriched by something miraculous. The locals hope that once again next year they will marvel at the appearance of what they call the holy snakes of the Virgin Mary. Until then, they feel assured that no ill will fall on the island and its people.